The New York Times catching a lot of heat from Democrats for its front page story on President Trump's speech responding to the two mass shootings over the weekend. The original headline reading, "Trump urges unity versus racism." Now that drew angry tweets from several 2020 Democratic candidates outraged at the way the paper framed the president's speech. So, get this, the Times then changing the headline to "Assailing Hate But Not Guns." A spokeswoman for the paper saying the original headline was flawed. Let's bring in Howard Kurtz, host of Media Buzz. Howie, do you think that the original headline was flawed?
I think there's actually nothing wrong with the original headline. As somebody who's written a lot of newspaper headlines, I can tell you it's hard to do this under deadline pressure with short spaces. It accurately reflected the president's speech, but that was not acceptable in the media's current anti-Trump climate. And so it seems to me that the second paragraph of the story said, in addition to the things he said, he also didn't bring up gun control, and that's fine, and the paper can use other news analyses and columns or whatever to attack and analyze and rip apart the president's speech. But basically, the Times caved in to this left-wing mob that finds it completely unacceptable, was unwilling to stomach a headline that said, yes, President Trump went on the air and he condemned white supremacy, hatred, and racism.
Well, and I got to tell you, as a former Republican press secretary, they would have lasted about 10 seconds in that job because every headline is bad and you learn to work around it. I mean, I've called so many reporters in my past complaining about a headline, and what does a reporter always say? I don't write the headlines. Right, because there's a headline writer. But
that's generally true.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she tweeted this: "Let this front page serve as a reminder of how white supremacy is aided by and often relies upon the cowardice of mainstream institutions." Now, the New York Times, they have a motto, without fear or favor. But changing this headline really caused maybe more trouble than it was worth.
Well, I could argue that the second headline was broader and perhaps better in that, you know, I happened to be on the air right after the president's speech, and I said there was a notable omission in the speech because he had tweeted hours earlier he's going to call for stricter background checks, and he didn't do that in the speech. But AOC, you know, who can be very effective in skewering the media, kind of like the president does, only from the left, way over the top on this one. Essentially what she's saying is, I will not abide the New York Times having a straightforward headline. It has to reflect the animus that I feel toward the president and the people who agree with me that he's a terrible guy and he's a racist and he's a white supremacist. That's not the job of a headline in a news story.
She wasn't the only one that brought things up. Cory Booker, the senator from New Jersey, is a candidate for president. He tweeted, "Lives literally depend on you doing better, NYT. Please do." Is that really the case, that lives depend on the New York Times doing better?
Well, I don't think a single headline is going to affect this, but certainly a number of 2020 Democratic candidates saw this as a great opportunity to pile on the New York Times, which usually is a paper that they kind of like. But I've got to say about this raw climate now, Dana, in the wake of the mass shootings in El Paso and in Dayton, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of frustration. We all feel it. But some of the people, journalists as well as commentators, who are now ripping President Trump, even though he gave a speech in which he denounced white supremacy. Right. Oh, he didn't mean it. He's just reading off the prompter. He's really the cause of all this. He's inciting it. He wants this to happen. I think they are crossing the very lines that they accuse the president of crossing with some of his divisive rhetoric. And criticizing his rhetoric is fair game. To take that next step and say he is to blame for a crazed shooter, that he wants this, I think they're letting their own animus toward this particular president
and to demand that a newspaper,
cloud their judgment.
A newspaper that they generally like, that they change something so that they can fit their narrative, seems a little out of bounds. We have more to get to. Howard Kurtz, thanks for being on the show.
Good to see you.